I sat frozen at the lavish dining table, surrounded by relatives whose faces blurred into a haze as my father's voice echoed through the ornate dining hall. My ears buzzed, my cheeks flushed hot with humiliation. "She's nothing but a failure." My father's voice thundered, loud enough for even the catering staff to pause awkwardly, trays in hand. "She's a mistake, always has been." An icy silence descended over the table, broken only by the uncomfortable shifting of chairs and the whisper of judgmental murmurs. My mother stared down at her plate, unable to meet my eyes. My siblings glanced between my father and me, faces pale, mouths open in stunned shock. I felt the heat creeping up my neck, a firestorm of humiliation and anger roiling beneath my skin. But instead of shouting back, instead of defending myself or begging him to stop, I simply stood up, calmly folded my napkin, and walked toward the door. I heard him scoff behind me. "See? She can't even stand up for herself." His words burned deep, each syllable like a lash across my back, but I kept moving forward. I pushed through the grand dining hall doors and into the cold, moonlit night, my hands trembling, breath uneven. Once outside, I leaned against my car, fighting tears that threatened to spill. But crying was exactly what he wanted, proof he had won. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Not again. I'd spent years trying to please my father, working tirelessly to meet his impossible standards. But no matter how hard I pushed myself, nothing was ever enough. Every accomplishment, every effort, reduced to failure in his eyes. This night was just the breaking point, the last piece of my shattered self-esteem falling to the ground. I drove home in numb silence, my grip white-knuckled around the steering wheel. When I reached my small apartment, I slumped onto the couch, staring blankly at the cracked ceiling. For hours, I replayed the scene in my head, anger and sadness swirling in my heart. The next morning, my best friend, Lisa, called. "Hey, you okay?" I heard what happened. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a neutral tone. But Lisa knew better. "Come on, don't let him get to you. Listen, I'm picking you up. We're going to grab coffee and figure this out together." Lisa was my rock, the only person who knew the real me beneath the carefully constructed facade. I reluctantly agreed, grateful for her support. We met at our favorite cafe, a cozy little spot where the owner greeted us with warm smiles. Lisa nudged me gently. "Cheer up. Things always get better." "Easy for you to say," I sighed, sipping my latte. "I have no money, no career, no prospects." Dad wasn't entirely wrong. Lisa shook her head defiantly. "You're not a failure. You're just stuck. Maybe what you need is a little luck." She pulled out 2 lottery tickets and slid one toward me with a playful grin. "I bought one for each of us this morning. Hey, who knows? Maybe you're about to become a millionaire." I laughed bitterly, dismissing her optimism. "Lottery? Seriously? Why not?" Lisa insisted. "It's not like things could get worse." I shrugged, humorlessly taking the ticket. "Fine. Here's to hoping." For a moment, I stared at the tiny paper in my hand. It seemed absurd, naive even. I'd always believed in hard work, in building my own success. But right now, the thought of leaving my life to chance felt oddly comforting. 2 days passed in a blur of hopelessness, replaying my father's harsh words. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, Lisa called me early Tuesday morning, her voice breathless. "Check your lottery ticket. The numbers are out." I laughed dryly, barely paying attention. "Yeah, like I could ever win." "Just do it," she urged, unusually intense. With a sigh, I opened the lottery app on my phone, punched in my numbers, and froze. My heart hammered violently in my chest, breath catching painfully in my throat. "Lisa," I whispered, my voice shaking. "What? Did you win $20? She laughed jokingly. "No. Lisa, it says I won." My voice broke. $1 million. "Stop joking," Lisa said, skeptical yet hopeful. "I'm serious." My vision blurred, tears suddenly spilling down my cheeks. I won. "Lisa, I just won $1 million." The line went silent for several stunned seconds before Lisa erupted into joyous laughter. You see? I told you. You deserve this. A powerful wave of emotions swept over me. Relief, shock, disbelief, and then determination. I'd spent my life feeling inadequate, broken under my father's scorn. But in this moment, something shifted deep inside me. I wasn't the failure he claimed. I had worth, and now I finally had the chance to prove it to everyone. Over the next 2 days, I carefully planned my next move. I avoided everyone, ignoring texts from family members offering empty apologies or prying questions. I had a new plan now, one that would finally show my father and everyone else that I wasn't just some mistake. 2 days later, I had my moment. The family had gathered again, this time at my father's sprawling mansion, supposedly for another dinner. My father's eyes narrowed when he saw me walk in, a silent question in his gaze, but I ignored it, calmly stepping to the front of the room where everyone could see me. "Ah, she returns," he sneered sarcastically. "Come back for another lesson?" "No," I replied firmly, confidence surging through me for the first time in my life. "I'm here to show you exactly who you underestimated." He smirked dismissively.
What?
"Did you finally get a job at a fast food joint?" My smile widened, enjoying the moment. "Actually, Dad, I just won $1 million. And guess what? I'm starting my own business, something you'll never be able to control." His laughter died in his throat as confusion rippled across his face, eyes widening with disbelief. "You're lying," he snapped, his voice trembling slightly. "There's no way." I calmly pulled out the winning ticket, holding it up for everyone to see. Gasps erupted around the table. Even my mother stared, eyes wide with shock. My father's face went pale, the smug expression melting into disbelief. "Impossible." I met his gaze steadily, feeling an exhilarating strength I'd never known before. "You called me a failure."
A mistake.
"But the only mistake was yours, for never believing in me." He slumped into his chair, speechless, while around me, voices rose in excited congratulations. Lisa rushed to hug me tightly, pride glowing in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered softly. I turned back to my father, watching him sink deeper into stunned silence. From now on, no one decides my worth but me. In that moment, victory wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming myself. My father's harsh words had been the fire, igniting something powerful inside me. And now I was finally free. The only mistake was underestimating what I was capable of. I'd won far more than $1 million. I'd won back my dignity. 2 days earlier, if you told me that I'd be standing confidently in front of my family, holding up undeniable proof of my newfound fortune, I would have laughed bitterly. Life had never favored me before. I'd always been the quiet disappointment, the one who was invited out of obligation, never expectation. Yet, here I was, heart pounding, lottery ticket still raised high, and the very people who mocked me now frozen, mouths agape. The stunned silence around the table was like music to my ears. "You're lying," my father finally managed, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Why would I lie?" I challenged, my voice surprisingly steady. "You taught me better than that, right? Lying would be beneath even your low opinion of me." The room stirred uncomfortably. My cousins exchanged embarrassed glances. Aunt Margaret shifted uneasily in her chair. But I was past caring. They'd all silently agreed with my father's cruel words 2 nights ago. None of them had stepped in to defend me when I was humiliated, labeled a mistake in front of everyone. This was my redemption. Raw, unapologetic, undeniable. My father opened his mouth, clearly searching for something cutting to say, something to reduce me once again to his definition of worthlessness. But this time, nothing came out. For once, his booming voice failed him. For once, my quiet victory had reduced him to speechlessness. I turned away, not bothering to linger for their reactions. I'd said everything that needed saying. Outside, the cool night air brushed my cheeks, refreshing and liberating. But my triumph was tempered by the lingering pain of betrayal. Could money truly erase years of being invisible, undervalued? My phone vibrated urgently in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. Lisa again, her voice anxious. So? How did it go? Tell me everything. I laughed softly, the sound shaky, yet genuine. It was satisfying. She squealed on the other end. You should have taken pictures. I would have paid to see their faces. I smiled despite myself. Believe me, I'll remember their expressions forever. But even as we laughed, my thoughts drifted back to the deeper wound my father had inflicted. Money had given me the momentary satisfaction of revenge, but it hadn't healed the ache of rejection. Was this what winning felt like? I wasn't sure yet. That night, alone in my modest apartment, I sat staring at the lottery ticket. $1 million. The number looked surreal on the paper. Was this the universe's apology? A way of balancing the scales after years of pain? Or was it simply luck, cold and indifferent? I had two choices now: let my newfound fortune define me, or seize the chance to build something meaningful, something of my own making, beyond anyone's judgment. The next morning, I cashed in my ticket. The bank teller smiled warmly as the numbers transferred into my account. It felt surreal, seeing those zeros lined up behind my name. I'd gone from invisible to powerful overnight. Yet, the hollow ache of my father's words persisted, urging me forward. I spent the entire day researching investments, charities, and causes close to my heart. I wanted to make this windfall count, not just for myself, but to ensure no one else had to endure the humiliation I had. That afternoon, while browsing through charities, my phone buzzed. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the caller ID. Dad. Hello. My voice was steady, colder than I'd intended. Silence stretched on the line, heavy and tense, before he finally spoke. His voice was strained, almost reluctant. I suppose congratulations are in order. You're only calling because I won, I snapped bitterly. He sighed deeply. Look, I didn't mean. You did, I interrupted firmly. You meant every word. He paused, clearing his throat awkwardly. Maybe I was harsh, but you must admit, winning a lottery doesn't exactly prove you're successful. My grip tightened on the phone. Even now, he couldn't acknowledge my worth. It's not the lottery when that's my success. It's realizing my worth doesn't depend on your approval. You can't take this from me, Dad. Before he could respond, I hung up, feeling an empowering sense of control surge through me. My father's validation no longer mattered. I'd spent my life seeking it, craving it desperately, and it had gotten me nowhere. That night, Lisa and I celebrated at our favorite cafe, champagne flutes in hand. She toasted cheerfully, to new beginnings. But as I raised my glass, movement caught my attention. At the cafe's entrance stood my mother, looking anxious and hesitant. I'll be right back, I murmured, standing up. She met me halfway, her eyes glistening with regret. I'm sorry. I've let him speak for us both for too long. My throat tightened. Why didn't you ever say something? She lowered her gaze.
Fear.
Weakness. But seeing you stand strong that night, it made me realize how wrong we've all been. Emotions swelled in my chest. Mom, I just wanted you to believe in me. I always did, she said softly, eyes shimmering. I just didn't know how to stand up against him. I hugged her fiercely, years of resentment melting into forgiveness. We can figure it out now. Together. 2 days earlier, I'd been humiliated, my life seemingly in ruins. Today, I stood transformed, not because of $1 million lottery ticket, but because I'd finally chosen to define myself beyond anyone else's perception. As I returned to Lisa, my mother by my side, I felt a profound shift within myself. This wasn't just luck. It was a second chance, a wake-up call that had finally awakened my inner strength. This was my new beginning, and this time I was writing the story. Over the next few days, my life transformed at a dizzying pace. Word about my lottery win spread quickly, prompting phone calls from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, each suddenly eager to reconnect. It was amusing at first, but soon became exhausting, as it felt like everyone wanted something from me now that I was no longer a failure. Despite the chaos, I held on to the fierce determination I'd found within myself that night at my father's mansion. I refused to let anyone dictate how I should live my life again. This was my opportunity, and I was going to use it wisely. I bought a modest house away from the city, somewhere quiet enough to rebuild without distractions. But even as I settled into my new surroundings, I felt restless, driven by something deeper than money could fix. It was the lingering ache of rejection, the need to prove to myself, not just to my family, that I wasn't defined by their harsh judgments. A week later, while organizing my new home office, a familiar face appeared at my doorstep. It was my younger sister, Emily. Unlike the others, she hadn't reached out since the disastrous dinner. Seeing her standing there, anxious yet hopeful, softened my heart a little. "I wasn't expecting you," I said, holding the door open reluctantly. "I needed to apologize in person," she admitted quietly, avoiding my gaze. "I shouldn't have let Dad talk to you like that." I studied her carefully, sensing genuine remorse. "You could have stood up for me." She winced. "I know. I'm not proud of myself." An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, I sighed, stepping aside. "Come in." Emily hesitated, her eyes wide as she took in my new home. "You've done well for yourself." "It's just money," I replied softly. "It doesn't erase anything." She turned to me suddenly, eyes brimming with sincerity. "I came to ask for your forgiveness, not your money. I've always admired your independence, even if I never said it. I guess I was too afraid to go against Dad." I felt a wave of conflicting emotions, anger, resentment, but beneath it, a deep yearning for connection. Emily had always been Dad's favorite, his golden child. Hearing her admit fear, vulnerability, and admiration was something entirely new. "Forgiveness takes time," I finally said, my voice gentle. "But I'm willing to try." Her shoulders visibly relaxed, a hopeful smile forming. That's all I could ask for. Emily's visit stirred something within me, a longing for genuine reconciliation, not the superficial apologies driven by greed I'd received from others. Maybe this could be the fresh start my family needed, free from our father's toxic expectations. In the weeks that followed, I poured my energy into a project I'd dreamed about for years, a nonprofit dedicated to helping young people who faced rejection and emotional abuse at home. I wanted them to know they weren't defined by the hurtful words or actions of others. I called it Second Chances, and it quickly became a haven, not only for those I sought to help but also for myself. Every person who walked through those doors mirrored parts of my own journey, the pain, the anger, the desperation to be seen. One evening, after finishing a late meeting, I heard an unexpected knock at my office door. My heart skipped when I saw who stood there. My father, looking strangely smaller, almost vulnerable. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply, though inside I was trembling. He hesitated, clearing his throat. "I've heard about your charity. You're helping a lot of people." I eyed him skeptically. "Did you come here just to patronize me again?" He shook his head slowly. "No. I came here to say I was wrong." My breath caught in my throat, disbelief flooding my senses. Those were words I'd never expected from him. "Do you even mean that?" He took a step closer, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I've spent my whole life pushing you, thinking harshness would make you stronger. But seeing how much you've accomplished, not because of me but in spite of me, has made me realize how wrong I've been." I could barely believe my ears. My father, the proud man who never admitted fault, was standing before me, humbled. Yet, part of me resisted accepting his apology, wary of being hurt again. "You hurt me deeply," I whispered, tears rising despite my effort to fight them. "I've spent my life believing I wasn't enough because of you." "I know," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I can't undo that, but I'd like to start again if you'll let me." The room seemed to shrink as I grappled with his words. Years of buried pain surged to the surface, but this time, there was relief too, relief that he'd finally acknowledged the damage he'd caused. "I can't pretend everything's fine," I told him firmly. "But maybe we can find a new way forward." He nodded quietly, accepting my conditions. That's all I want. Over the next several months, my father genuinely tried. It wasn't easy. Old patterns of judgment and criticism were hard to break, but gradually, a fragile trust formed. Through uncomfortable conversations and cautious attempts at understanding, we began to heal. My lottery winnings, initially viewed as just a stroke of luck, had transformed into something far greater, a catalyst for healing, not just for me, but for those around me. My nonprofit flourished, impacting hundreds of lives. Every smile from someone I'd helped reaffirmed that this was the path I'd always been meant to follow. 1 year later, at another family gathering, this time hosted at my home, I stood up once more, this time in a room filled with warmth, not tension. My father's eyes met mine, pride finally shining genuinely in his gaze. I've learned something invaluable. I began confidently, looking around at family and friends who had come together. Success isn't defined by anyone else's expectations. It's about believing in yourself, even when no one else does. It's about kindness, second chances, and knowing your worth. The room erupted in heartfelt applause. Lisa beamed proudly. Emily smiled encouragingly, and my father simply nodded, eyes filled with a quiet respect I'd longed for my entire life. As the evening drew to a close, my father approached, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you. Truly." I smiled softly, feeling peace wash over me. "Thank you." Winning the lottery had changed my life, but it was the strength I found within myself, the courage to face rejection and redefine my worth, that truly transformed everything. In the end, I didn't just surprise my family, I surprised myself. I turned my darkest moment into an empowering journey, proving that the greatest victories aren't measured in dollars, but in reclaiming our dignity, healing our wounds, and giving kindness even when it's hardest. I was no longer anyone's mistake. I was finally, unapologetically, myself.